Hello and welcome to the Matt's Movie Reviews Saturday Conversation Show, an interview series where I talk to entertainment personalities, content creators, and filmmakers about their work and love of film. Today's guest is Matthew Holmes, an award-winning filmmaker whose credits include Twin Rivers, The Cost, and The Legend of Ben Hur, which is now streaming on Stan and going all the way up the charts there as well. I think last time we saw Matt, it was like number two up in the charts there, which is really awesome for you. And
Yeah, it is.
look, in an Australian film industry where it is really rare for filmmakers to make, successive movies, Matthew has proven to be the exception to the rule with an example of how do-it-yourself ingenuity and that kind of independent filmmaking grit can really take you a long way, and just not giving in to the naysayers and the people who just don't want to give you, if the people out there don't want to give you a hand, you're just like, well, fuck them, we're just going to go move forward anyway, and I'm going to make this movie. And I really love that about you, Matt, and I love that about your films as well. And we have talked before, but I'm really looking forward to this long forward conversation with you. So first
Yeah.
of all, it's great to see you again. And also, look, yeah, man, Legend of Ben Hur, I know that's a passion project that you had. We've talked about that film when it came back out in like 2017,
Yep,
and
that's
now
right.
it's having another lease fly for streaming on Stan. And what's it like? I got to say, because the movie has come out, and but when you have like someone like Stan, like a big streaming service in Australia, and takes on a film like that, what does that do to that film now? Have you found that people like, oh, I haven't seen this before, I haven't heard of this before? What type of reactions are you getting to it now? This passion project of yours is getting a new lease of life.
Well, yeah, it's great because this is the first time that it's been available on a streaming video on demand service. It's been on other platforms, but you had to rent it or buy it. It
Right,
hasn't been available in the library of a streamer since it was
right.
released. So for me, this is 7 years late. This should have gone to a streamer directly after it was released on cinemas, but for some reason it just didn't.
Mm.
And it did get picked up by Channel 9, but they took it exclusively for like 3 years, which means it wasn't allowed to be sold to a streamer. So for 3 years, so after its theatrical run, it just went to DVD, Blu-ray, and then a couple of TV screenings, and that was it. It was only available to rent and buy on, online and video on demand. And so therefore, what I'm finding is that this year it hit SBS on demand, and then it was followed by Stan now. And what has happened is there's been a massive resurgence of people in Australia that never even knew the film existed who are suddenly discovering it all these years later, 7 years later. And they're all wondering, where did this come from? So we're suddenly seeing this massive uptick in people's awareness and discovery of the film, which is completely fantastic. It's sort of what we should have had 5, 6 years ago, and we're only now getting it. So I'm really, really grateful, and I've been hanging out for this day for years. So yeah, it's great. It's like it is.
It is.
It's like it gets a second wind.
It is great, and it's really interesting these days how, and I don't know if you have been seeing this kind of trend that's been happening in the US. There's a lot of movies that are out on re-release. There might be to mark some sort of anniversary or maybe some type of demand for certain films, but these films are coming out for re-release. Say, I don't know, the re-release of Whiplash that came out like 10 years ago or something like that, or maybe an older
Yes.
film like The Right Stuff or what have you. These films come out and they put a little bit of dent in the box office because a lot of people either hadn't seen the film before or get a chance to watch it in a cinema,
Yeah.
or someone like myself would have who have only seen The Right Stuff or something like that on a small screen get a chance to watch this really big spectacle film on a big screen. And
Yes.
it's a great opportunity to do that. It's really interesting how there's these kind of how movies can really have these second and third lives, because it used to be like that. It used to be really, like cinema, home entertainment, something like that, then TV or other way around. And streaming kind of like came in and kind of took that away a little bit. But now you kind of have those different those different periods where these films can come out and just really, have a new life to them again. I think it's really interesting and fascinating to watch.
Oh, absolutely. A lot of films are even they're 20 years old, and people grew up watching them, and now they get the chance to see them in the cinema. So I think it's a fantastic idea. I don't know why more cinemas aren't sort of reaching out to find those cult titles that people would be interested in. So I think it's a great idea, and we're seeing great results with these re-releases. I don't know. I don't know if Ben Hall's got that kind of status, but it would be nice if there was some sort of resurgence to, get it on this big screen, because it really did have a very, very small theatrical run, and it was only on about 18 screens across Australia when it came out.
Mm.
So it really didn't get a lot of eyes on it. And it's one of those films that does benefit from the big screen because it's got the big vistas and the wide screen landscapes and costumes and horses and so on. So who knows? It might yet see some big screen time again. That'll be good.
And it's really interesting in regards to yourself as your evolution as a filmmaker. From what I understand, when you were 13, around that time, you watched films like on TV, like the Harryhausen movies, Empire Strikes Back, that kind of stuff, and other things like Ben-Hur and other movies. And around that time, when you're 13, you're like, I really want to make my Bushranger film. I feel it's Ned Kelly, right? It's like you think to yourself, I want to make a Ned Kelly movie, and you and your brother would go out in the backyard, and you get your camera, you make your stuff, and here you are, you've made that movie, and now that movie's been seen again by a new audience. And I'm sure if you can look back to the 13-year-old self, you can say, you are going to make your Bushranger movie, and who knows, it might be even more Bushranger stuff in the future. I think it's really cool to think about that 13-year-old self, what had this dream, and even though it took maybe longer than you expected, you actually got your Bushranger movie up there in Legend of Ben Hur. It must be a really kind of cool thing to think back on.
Yeah, it is. It's pretty surreal when you think back on something that was as vivid in my mind as a 13-year-old to actually go, yeah, I really want to make a Ned Kelly movie. Well, it was more like I want to make an Australian Western. Like I
Mm,
loved all the westerns that my grandparents would show me, but because I sort of grew up in the Australian regional area, and so I sort of understood what Australia looked like, with the flat
yeah.
lands, it looked like a western to me. And so when I saw American westerns, I sort of always felt like I wanted to see my Australia sort of imposed on that genre, and that's sort of why the Ned Kelly thing really just attracted me. So that's what I always wanted. I saw a guy on, in armor on horseback riding around, and I thought that's what I want to make. So yeah, I guess it stuck around and never left. And it's great that, in some form I did make my Ned Kelly movie. A Ben Hall film. But the Ned Kelly film dream is still alive. I've certainly got a plans to make a Ned Kelly film, because I still don't think, even though we've had like 6 adaptations, I still don't think it's been done correctly.
Mm.
So who knows? We'll see what the future brings.
What was your first cinema experience? Do you remember which movie, your first movie you saw at a cinema?
Yes, the first cinema movie I saw, I can't remember the cinema's name now. It was in Adelaide, but it was E.T.
Oh, okay, cool.
And I was a very young child. I think I was 6 or something like that. Or maybe I can't remember. When did ET come out? 1981?
Eight, 82.
82. I was born in 77. So yeah, I would have only been about 5 or 6. And my grandmother and I had grown up pretty much without television. So I didn't even know what a movie was in one sense at that age. And she took me there because she heard it was a lovely family film. And I actually was utterly terrified. I was
Mm,
so scared because I didn't know that what I was watching wasn't real. So I got taken out of the cinema into the foyer like 3 times. But I distinctly remember that even at that young age, how much of an impact movies had on me. And yeah, so I was terrified of E.T. And then I didn't watch another movie again until Edward Scissorhands in the cinema. And
that's a
again,
big gap.
vastly grew up without television and movies. And only around that sort of early 90s time did videotape and things like that start coming into our family, and then we would start watching things on the weekends. So yeah, so I think there was like an absence of cinema in my life. And then when I finally, in my early life, and then when I finally got it, I just sort of, I was like a junkie. I just was like,
Mm,
I hadn't had it. So I was absorbing this stuff so quickly. Whereas I think if you just grew up with it your whole life and were very used to it, it probably, I don't know, you just got used to it. But I wasn't used to it yet. So when I saw things for the first time, like Ben-Hur or Star Wars or Gallipoli and Harryhausen movies that my parents were introducing me to, they were blowing my mind as a kid.
yeah.
So that's probably why it just made me go, that's it. I wanted to want to make movies because I was like, I was always in my mind, I was imagining stories and coming up with ideas and in my head, and movies were as a way to put them on the screen to actually show what you're dreaming and show what you know. So, yeah.
Interestingly, the first things that you were really drawn to was kind of like animation, stop motion animation, especially going back to those Ray Harryhausen movies like Jason and Argonauts and Empire Strikes Back
Yes.
and the stuff that happens in there. And you had a very long career working as an animator, stop motion in TV commercials, right? From what I understand, you
Yes.
worked on a lot of kind of like big kind of like campaigns that people will know of in Australia, like Louis the Fly, the Schmackos
Yep.
ads, the what were the home hardware ads with the
Home
with the
Hardware
dog and all that
Dogs,
kind of stuff.
the
Yeah.
Dogalogs, and Mr. Reach, and yeah, lots of TV cam ads. There was an animation company called Anifex. They don't exist anymore, but they were around from the 80s through until 2012. And I always knew I wanted to get into animation. I thought I wanted to be an animator but I always had this love of, live action, but I thought animation was my big passion. And I
Mm,
followed it for a while, but then I did find that I really wanted to start getting into live action.
yeah.
So, for me, animation was a good sort of segue into the film industry and for a way to get some work and get experience, and I have taken a lot of what I learned through animation into my live action filmmaking. Um, Stop motion animation is about detail and being able to um, look at things one frame at a time, or to be able to watch something and spot things within the frame and be very, very attentive to everything in the frame. And I
Mm.
find that sort of fastidious attention to detail that I had to have for animation has very much carried over into my live action directing. So yeah, there's been a lot of benefits.
I heard you refer to it as precision directing, like everything has to be really specific and such. And one of the things that you learned in that time as well was storyboarding, right? Like supposedly storyboarding for you is a big thing. And it's interesting how a lot of commercial people come from commercial background, really Scott, I think, being the most notable of them, and how storyboards is a big part of their kind of like filmmaking process. Is storyboard still a big part in what you do in regards to your films today?
Absolutely. I don't go making a film without first storyboarding the whole movie myself. I don't ask anyone else to storyboard it for me. I do all my own drawings, and sometimes I'll do them in incredible detail, especially if, it's a very special effects heavy or it's got something very specifically I need to communicate, because I need to be able to. It's like my first pass at directing the movie, but I also need to be
Mm,
able to show people what it is I'm trying to get on the screen, because words only get you so far,
right.
and it's a visual medium. So, um, and I see the movie in my head. So I read the scene, I can see it all, the shots, the cuts, everything in my head. So it's really, really helpful for the crew and everybody who's, for all those thousands of questions that are going to come at me once I start directing, is that if I have the storyboard, everyone just can, half the my explaining is done because it's all right
Yeah.
there.
Yeah.
So it's a great tool. It takes a long time to do, but it's invaluable because I find that if I don't storyboard, cutting the movie together, it just never works out as well. But if I storyboard it and shoot my board, the edit goes so much smoother because all the shots line up, everything's going in the right direction, and everything has a symmetry to it, and it feels right. And there's a language to cinema, as you would know. There's this sort of unspoken language to the way films are put together, and storyboards really allow me to express that language and get it across to the crew who have to ultimately help me bring it to the screen.
Interestingly, though, when it came to, I'm not going to refer this to as your feature film, but I'm going to, definitely an experimental film you kind of did, which was the Biscuit Effect, like back
Yep,
in 2005 it came out. That
yep,
was like, when I say experimental film, that was definitely was because you had like what, a day and a half to shoot that stuff. And it was all improvised, right? You just let your
yes,
actors kind of go. And so that kind of went against the grain of what you were used to doing, right? Is that just you
yes.
just trying to try out different things and saying, look, let's see what happens if we just kind of wing it? Is that what that was that whole purpose of that movie was to just see what it's like to try another way of trying to get a film in the can?
Yeah, well, what it was born out of actually a frustration because I'd been working on Twin Rivers, and Twin Rivers I'd filmed it, but it had still not. I was still in post production. It took me 2 years to do post production on Twin Rivers because I just couldn't figure out how to complete it. And
Right.
I was so frustrated at how long it had taken me. I'd spent 4 years shooting this movie. I still hadn't posted it. And when you spend years doing something and you've got nothing to show for it, it gets very, very disheartening. So the biscuit effect in a way was a way to go, I'm going to make a feature film in one day. Instead of taking 4 years, I'm going to make it in one day. How could I shoot a movie in one day?
Hmm.
And so it really was about that was the challenge I set myself. And then I just came up with an idea and a concept and a story and a conceit that would fit that. And then I just grabbed a bunch of, actors that were willing to go with me and give it a try. The results are pretty mixed. It was a lot of fun doing it. I didn't think it was going to work, but when I watched the footage back, I realized, hey, we might actually have something here. But yeah, I guess it was an experiment. It was a bit of a rebellion against the fastidious, highly organized way that I do work normally to rather just sort of throw all of that and go in the completely opposite direction. And it was fun. But yeah, I don't think it's something that I would want to do over and over and over.
Hmm.
But it was a bit of fun.
I'm just gonna jump to this game I like to play with my guests. It's called Choose Between Two.
Oh
So
yeah.
pretty much I'm going to
Oh,
give you two options based
oh,
on the theme of some sort, and
yeah.
you're going to tell me why you want to choose, which one you're going to choose, and just elaborate into that. We spoke about Ridley Scott a bit
Yep.
before. I read that both Alien and Aliens are like two for you, like they're the two films that like you love, that like they're up there. And of course, Ridley
Absolutely.
Scott directed Alien, James Cameron directed Aliens. Between those two directors, Ridley Scott and James Cameron, which do you prefer?
Oh man. Oh, I think I prefer James Cameron. Yeah, I think I prefer James Cameron because I find his films are very kinetic.
Hmm.
Um, and I find he hits more than he misses. Whereas I find Ridley Scott, he can go either way. Sometimes
Yeah.
he hits and he hits really well, and then sometimes he just sort of misses the mark. Whereas James Cameron mostly hits. And so that's a tough choice, but I'll go with I'll go with James Cameron on that one.
Next one, the Battle of the 1993 Westerns, Tombstone or Wyatt Earp?
Tombstone,
Oh, interesting, because I know you like
definitely.
Wyatt Earp as well, right?
I do like Wyatt Earp, but I think um I find that I can sort of I like Wyatt Earp. It sort of fills in a bit of the blanks that Tombstone didn't. But
Hmm.
Tombstone has just got a look and the cast and the dialogue and the aesthetic of the movie. It's so beautiful and so underrated. Although I think now it's far more appreciated now than it was in '93,
Yeah.
and which is great. But nah, Tombstone, that's one of those. I just never get sick of watching Tombstone. It's one of those movies that it doesn't matter how many times I put it on, I always have a good time.
Such an awesome cast as well. I used to watch that movie over and over and over when I was a kid.
Yeah.
Um, and to this day, like whenever people talk about like the Oscars,
Yes,
how relevant it is and that stuff. And I always think to myself, how the hell does Val Kilmer not even get a nomination for
I
that
know.
performance of Doc Holliday? Because I think in that decade of the 90s, and Val Kilmer was definitely a prominent star of that decade. That was one of the
Absolutely.
great performances. Absolutely. It's just
Yeah.
incredible he didn't get nothing for it at all.
That the movie got no awards. Even Kurt
Nothing.
Russell was incredible.
Yeah.
That he didn't get anything either was just, yeah, it's just a mind-boggling thing. And I have looked into the reasons why it got sort of overlooked and so on, but it is one of the great overlooked things in history. And no, you're right. I mean, it was the first movie I ever bought on VHS in widescreen.
Right.
So it
Yeah.
was the first time I could see a movie in the letterbox format was Tombstone, and I just loved it. And I
Yeah.
thrashed it. I just don't know how many times. I even recorded. I love the dialogue so much. I used to record the dialogue onto cassette tape so I could
Mm.
play the movie scenes from the movie in my car while I was just driving because I just love listening to the dialogue.
Oh, it's such a great movie. The Battle of the 1998 War movies, Saving
Oh,
Private Ryan or Thin Red Line?
oh man. If you'd asked me in 1998, it was Private Ryan was the absolute winner. You ask me now, 20 something years later, I think I'd still choose Private Ryan, but I'm breaking a sweat to not choose The Thin Red Line because I've just come to appreciate that so much. I actually hated The Thin Red Line when I first saw it in the cinema in 98.
Mm.
Absolutely hated it. But it really grew on me over the years, and now it's almost up there with Private Ryan. But I think Private Ryan still got, I think it's just a much more streamlined kind of movie and a much more easy watch. But they are chalk and cheese in lots of ways. But I think I still prefer Saving Private Ryan.
Thin Red Line was filmed in Australia as well, wasn't it? That was in the Gold Coast.
Sure was. Yeah, it was
Yeah.
filmed up in no, what much further than the Gold Coast. It was filmed up around Cairns and Port Douglas,
Okay. All right.
right up in the
Cool.
which is where I plan to shoot the Guns of Mushu. In
All
fact,
right.
we've
Very
got the
good.
same location manager as Thin Red
Awesome.
Line, so I'm sure she'll know all the good spots.
And was that your first Malik experience as well?
Yes, it was
Yeah.
actually. It was. And so I didn't know what to expect
Mm.
and I didn't understand why the film was doing what it was doing and why it was so, you know, the way Malik is. But just watching more Malik over the years and realizing, okay, this is what he does. This is his style. I could go back and look at Thin Red Line with more appreciation.
Next one. Okay, you're watching like a sci-fi or horror movie. Would you rather see practical effects or CGI?
Practical every time. Yeah, no contest. CGI can certainly do some impressive things, and I'm glad we had CGI for Gollum and things like
Mm.
that. But when it comes to horror and blood and gore and creatures and stuff, practical every time. Yeah.
Yeah.
I think because I know it's practical, I know it's fake, and I know digital's fake. Like my brain says it's, I can see it, it's fake. But there's just something about the practical that just, I don't know, I can let my suspension of disbelief. I can just allow that more with
Yeah.
practical for some reason. It's just on an intuitive level. I think because it's
There's something
actually
about,
there.
yeah, but that's the thing. When you watch, like, if you watch a movie from the 80s, say, and there's been a lot of great practical, but let's just say you got a movie that's kind of lukewarm practical effects in it, right? They maybe worked there but didn't date as well. Even though some of the practical might not date as well, there's something authentic about it because it's something that's organic. It's
Yeah.
something you feel like you can touch. You can actually feel the presence of those models in those animatronics or what have you on the set. Where if you watch kind of some CGI, and there's been some really bad CGI, especially in the 90s, like something like a Mummy 2 is like a very popular meme-ish example.
Yeah.
When you watch that, it just takes you way out of it because even though back then it would have looked cool, maybe now that whatever element of facade that it did have, it's totally gone. And
Yeah.
then all you see is like Oz behind the curtain, and
Yeah.
sometimes you just don't want that when you're watching a movie. Where with practical stuff, even though some of it might not work as well as it did, I'd rather see kind of like Stan Winston's Pumpkinhead, and watch that
Yeah.
kind of stuff than watching Peter Jackson's Battle of Five Hobbit Battle of Five Armies. You
Oh,
know what I mean?
absolutely.
And
Yeah. No,
because
there's
again,
no
it's that
contest.
yeah, the craft as well is just fantastic as well. I think.
Yeah, exactly. Like if you just take the orcs from the original, from the Lord of the Rings trilogy, and then the digital orcs in the Hobbit trilogy, there's just
Mm,
no contest. The reality, even though I know that it's just an actor under rubber, and I can see the limitations of the rubber, I can see the actor under there to a certain degree. I buy it as an orc. It's just so much more than I buy the digital
yeah.
and the really funny thing is, I'm currently I have lots of projects on the boil, and I'm doing budgets and schedules for all of these different kinds of films in lots of genres, and I get a lot of quotes, from special effects companies, both practical and digital. And I'm
Mm,
telling you, it is an absolute lie that digital is cheaper than
mm,
practical. It's so far more expensive. But there's this sort of idea that computers just do it and it's much
mm,
cheaper and easier. And that's why we don't use practical as much anymore. But it's just not true. It's very difficult and it's extraordinarily expensive. So I tend to go, in fact, with Guns of Mushu, when we're doing the planning out the scenes for that, I originally had a whole pile of things in that I thought would just assume would be digital. But having gotten all the quotes from both practical and digital, we're actually going to be going back to practical far more, which is exciting because we're going to be doing things that, haven't been done in like a war movie in many, many years because it's
Yeah.
just the cheaper way to go.
Yeah. Okay, you're at a film, you're sitting down about to watch a film. What's your go-to snack? Would it be popcorn or a candy?
Popcorn.
Mm,
Absolutely, yeah. I hate paying as much as I have to, but every time I go to the cinema, I have to buy popcorn. Yeah, it's almost become I don't know, this when you walk in and the smell of the popcorn hits you. It's like that's this. Movies are comprised of the things you hear and the things you see, but the mouth and the nose they also need a sensation, and that is popcorn. So
yeah.
yeah, they just go together, movies and popcorn for me.
I might sound a bit elitist when I say this, but I'm going to go candy because when I go to screenings, always give me free popcorn, and I think the getting it for free just
Oh,
kind of takes away
okay.
from like the kind of like the like when I was a kid, like popcorn. That's the only chance I got popcorn, like or maybe if there's a
Yep.
fair or something like that, right? But yeah, I don't know, something that I think I might rather more. Like if I'm going out with my kids, they
Yep.
love the free popcorn, and I'm just like, yeah, you guys have the free popcorn. I'm going to spend that leftover money on a choc
On a
top or a
chocolate,
candy or
yeah.
something.
Yeah, well, see, I
Um,
can make the you can make the popcorn last most of the movie, whereas if I had a choc bar, that'd be gone in 5 minutes.
I can't make a pop. I eat the popcorn, but by the time the opening attractions are done, like
Oh,
it's
really?
gone.
Oh,
I
wow.
inhale the
Okay.
shit out of that thing. I
Yeah.
really do. And sometimes, like I'll watch a movie, I might suck on the kernels and stuff like that because of the salty residue or what have
Yes,
you.
yes. Wow, you
Um,
you go through them quick. It takes me sometimes I can't even get to the bottom throughout a whole movie because I take my time, very meticulous.
yes, it's true. Okay, I want to talk about Twin Rivers.
Yep.
So it's really interesting because we were saying before, like 20 minutes back, how you used to make movies with your brother when you were a kid, and then you have Darren, your brother, in this movie with you.
Yes.
And it's but based on like the true stories from your grandmother, right? Like a lot of stuff in here is
Yeah, they
like
were
inspired by her
yeah,
stories.
inspired by her travels and journeys in the 1940s. Yep.
And so I read this quote from you when it came to that movie, where you said you were starry-eyed about the reality of filmmaking when you were making that film.
Yeah.
And it's something that I've come across, like not only with filmmakers, but just artists in general, whether it be music industry or even what I mean with the entertainment media. There's a certain expectation or a certain belief of what something is, and then the rubber hits the road, and the grim realities of what it is to pursue an art comes into it. Because a lot of times it
Yeah.
comes down to commerce and resources, and it comes to
Yes.
those two kind of things, right? And you think to yourself, oh, it's going to be okay. I'm going to be able to do this and this, and it's going to result in that and that, and it doesn't happen. And you were saying before about the frustrating experience it was with Twin Rivers because it took a long time to get it going, and I imagine a lot of times as well that you will have doing weekend shoots and
It's mostly weekends. Yeah.
holidays as well.
Yep.
But when it came to that starry-eyed about the reality of filmmaking, what was your expectations beforehand, and what lessons did you learn afterwards they still take to you this day in regards to filmmaking?
Man, so many. I'm just trying to pick which is the best one to talk about. I think I was starry-eyed in that I think I was naive, but I needed to be naive because if I had known what I did not know before I started, I probably would never have started. It would have been too disheartening. Naivety to a degree can help you with this when you're starting out because you just don't know how impossible it is.
Hmm.
And if you don't know it's impossible, you just go, oh, I'll give it a go. I'm just going to do it. And you find your way to complete it. So it's not technically impossible, but it's virtually impossible.
Hmm.
But you don't know that. So you need your naivety to a degree. But I think I was expecting that if I could, if I could make a movie and make it, and I could have good acting and it could be well shot and it could be professionally presented, I really thought that would impress people, not audiences so much as that it would impress the industry, and then I would be ushered into and invited to do more. Because it
Yeah.
seemed to be what happened with NFX. Here I am I was a 17, 18-year-old kid making animated films and they were a bit janky and so on, but I showed it to NFX and they saw my potential and they brought me on board and trained me more and gave me more opportunities. And before you knew it, I was, a fully fledged professional animator. And I thought the film industry would be much the same. And when I finished it to find that the industry, and I still find it today, that the film industry doesn't care if you can make a film. They don't care if you can make a good film. It doesn't impress them. They're not impressed because there's so many people doing it. And,
Mm.
and there are the favorites. And so that's been disheartening that you can make it and you sort of want them to be impressed and then they just don't care. And then you got to go, okay, am I going to go for another round? So what
Mhm.
happens is you start really shifting about why you have to really start shifting. Why do you make films? What are you really trying to do this for? Who are you really trying to make the films for? And what I've done now is I've swung now. I don't try to make films to impress industry people because I'll never impress them. I just have to make films I believe in, that I'm interested in, and that I know certain audience members are going to connect with them.
Yeah.
And I make that audience my priority. And so what brings me a lot of joy now is as a director is, you know, Ben Hall was completely disregarded by every single film festival in Australia. Only a very few small independent film festivals took it on. But the big ones, the Melbourne, the Sydney, Adelaide, Perth, all of them rejected it.
Yeah.
But I have this fan base of people that are constantly reaching out to me, telling me how much they love the movie, how much they enjoy it, how many times they've watched it, when are you going to make more of these? And so that's what brings me the joy, is it found its audience and they love it. Even if the industry doesn't care, these people, it means something to their lives, much like, all my movies mean something to my life. And it's great
Yeah.
to know that my movie means something to even, not everybody, but just these people. And that's the refocus that I really had to do.
Yeah, it's really
Um,
interesting because I have similar parallels in my career. When I first started doing this back in 2006, it was an interesting transition period in the entertainment media landscape because all the magazines and such were slowly kind of fading away and everything was
yep.
going to online.
Yes.
So I set my presence online, but I needed to make a coin. And so the best way to do it is freelance writing, yeah. And so I did a bunch of that, but then a lot of opportunities kind of dried up in regards to that. And then I kind of moved away from it, had kids, and I was doing it more part-time. A few years ago, I got back into it like more, full-time again.
Yep.
And now trying to get those opportunities again, no matter all the work I did beforehand and everything else, it's so hard to find stuff, especially these days. People are getting laid off left and right in the industry now as well, in the digital spaces. It's just crazy right now. But what kind of taught me a few lessons. Number one, it taught me how to, even in my 40s, how to still try to deal with rejection, which is hard. It's still hard,
Oh,
because even
absolutely.
though you do have a little bit more mature mindset and you've been through certain walls and such, it's still nice to be wanted, right?
Absolutely.
Absolutely is.
Oh
But
yeah.
then it also taught me another thing, which is, for example, I remember I made a pitch to a company I used to work for, and I had this great pitch and I had these great ideas and I sent it to them. And usually they get back to me and tell me it's okay, but this time they ghosted me. And so it's been a month, I haven't heard anything, right? And I just had a realization. I just said, why am I pitching my best stuff to these guys when I could keep it to myself?
Yeah.
you know? And I just
Yep.
went, fuck them. I'm just going to do it myself. And that's what I'm in the process of doing right now. Like some of the stuff I was trying to pitch somewhere else, I'm going to do it myself. It's harder, definitely harder. I don't know if I'm going to make as much money as I did, but it comes to a self-realization, but that nobody owes you anything, really. And I think that's what I think I had at the beginning. I thought that's like, if you work and you have a resume and stuff, then people will want to take you on because they own you. But at the end of the day, a lot of time in my industry, especially, they just want to hire young kids that don't know better and can get paid shit, and that's it,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, and I imagine for yourself, like you just had to say, look, the film funding bodies, they're not giving me money to do what I need to do. The grand vision maybe I had for this film isn't what it is, but I can tweak it, I can change it, I can still make this.
Yeah.
Um, Is that something like that? Did you have kind of like that kind of like road to Damascus moment yourself when it came to something like Twin River and like developing Legend of Ben Hall, where you kind of like went, look, this is the reality now, and what I need to do is go down this different path. I thought this path with the golden bricks is where to go, but the golden bricks just turned out to be, cracked rocks. It's not
Yeah.
going to happen. But
Exactly.
I got to make my own kind of path. Is that kind of like something that you
Oh,
kind
it
of went through?
is absolutely. I mean, there's many years between Twin Rivers and Ben Hall, and having finished Twin Rivers, I was starry-eyed and thought that I was like, yeah, look, I did it. And there was that sense. I didn't feel like they owed me. I was owed a career, but I thought I had proven myself that I
Right.
was worthy enough to be given a chance
You're right.
to
Yeah.
do it again, you know.
Yeah.
And but I realized the industry just doesn't work that way.
Yeah.
And what I had to, and I remember I wrote the Ben Hall, The Legend of Ben Hall, straight after Twin Rivers. Like I had a
Mm.
draft in two, it came out Twin Rivers 2007. I had Ben Hall written by 2008. And collectively, every person I took it to, every funding body, every producer, everyone said, you will never get Ben Hall made as your second film. That was their words. This will never happen. You'll never, it's too big, it's too expensive. It was like a 20, $30 million movie. It
Mm.
said it'll never happen. You've got to do something smaller. So I went away and worked on something smaller, and that never happened either. And so again, I had to again a course correct. I just wanted to. I couldn't get anything happening. I couldn't get any finance, and so what I had to do was go back to why do you do this? You do it because you love it.
You're right.
So it was like, okay, let's go and make a Ben Hall short film because you could probably get enough money for that, and at least you get to play around in a world you love, even if it's just a 20-minute short film about Ben Hall. And maybe that might help the big film get made one day. So I just went out, and so now what I was doing, I was making something out of passion now. I wasn't doing it to get, for someone else to give me permission to do it. I was going to do it without permission, and I was going to do it because I loved it. And that short film is what became the movie, The Legend of Ben Hall, that's on Stan today. I didn't know it was going to turn into a feature, but again, that's the thing. You figure out how to do it yourself. You take the plunge and you do it out of passion, and you do it without, you go, I'm not going to, I don't need permission from the funding bodies. I went straight to my audience. I went to the people that love Ben Hall. I went to all the people that love this history and just so badly wanted a Ben Hall movie. And they backed it on Kickstarter. And boom, there's the movie. So that's definitely been the thing for my career that I'm learning is follow the audience and don't wait for permission.
Mm.
Just do it yourself. Find a way to get it done yourself, or at least most of it done yourself. Because if you can get over that hurdle and really start that ball rolling, and inevitably some other people will join you. And once it's really up and running, it'll find its own way.
Yeah.
So you've just got to really just get it going yourself.
Something something that I've really been proud of having over the last, especially our last like 10, 12 years or so, is that I've met people in the industry and I can turn to them and I can ask for advice. I
Yeah.
wouldn't necessarily say mentor, but like a mentor-esque kind of like,
Yes.
relationships there. People who have been through the trenches before I had, and I can, give some
Yes.
advice, or they might reach out to me and say, hey, try this and that.
Yes.
There's some couple of people especially that have done that to me. Around the time you were doing Rivers leading into Legend of Ben Hall, you had a couple of those people as well. You had Rolf the Here and you
Yes.
had Molly Reynolds, two very prominent filmmakers in the Australian landscape,
Yes.
Rolf the Here especially, with
Mm.
movies Bad Boy Bubby and such. How did they both come into your life around that time? And what was the impact that they had on you? Because I know you've said before you haven't been to film school, but Twin Rivers was your film school. And I guess Rolf and Molly would have been the professors in your life at that
Yeah,
time, right?
very much so. I mean, I had shot my film before I had met Rolf. I met Rolf briefly, but I really shot that on my own. And what had happened was is I had this finished, completed movie, but it wasn't edited. It was just footage. And Molly Reynolds was working at the South Australian Film Corporation, and she was also dating Rolf de Heer, who worked downstairs.
Right.
So
Okay.
a guy who I'd been introduced to Rolf because a person who was helping me with first ADing, he had done work on one of Rolf's films, and he made a brief introduction. But that's all it really was, just an introduction to Rolf. And then Molly was really trying to get the South Australian Film Corporation to support me. But in the end, they just didn't and wouldn't, despite her trying to help. And so between her and Rolf, they decided, you know what, we're going to help this kid ourselves. So what Rolf and Molly did is, especially Rolf, got together all of their people who they use for sound and editing and things like that, and basically said, hey, let's all help this guy. Can you give him some equipment? Can you give him some time? Let's help this guy get his film completed. and all for free. And so it was Rolf's asking them to do it that got them on board. And I cut the film myself. And then what I did is I left my computer at Rolf's place. And 2 times a week, I'd go around to Rolf's place and edit the movie with his supervision. So him and Molly would sit on the couch and go through my footage and go through my edit. And he would essentially tell me how to recut it and how to structure my shots and put the movie together. And he rewrote the voiceover for the film. And so it really was a film school where I had what I'd shot and Rolf and Molly sitting there telling me how to teaching me how to construct and edit a movie and why we do here, why we cut this, why we've got to cut that scene, we're going to take that bit there. And so I really got a great film school. And of course, I got to spend a lot of time with him talking about his career and all that sort of thing. And so I got an excellent film school through him. And I never would have completed Twin Rivers without Rolf and Molly. So I owe them a great deal. And then after that, when I got involved with Odin's Eye Entertainment, who were producers on Legend of Ben Hall, they introduced me to Greg McLean. And so I had a
Hmm.
lot of good, a lot of great conversations and mentorship with Greg McLean on The Legend of Ben Hall, who was an executive producer on that. And so along the way, there's always been filmmakers and producers that have turned around to sort of see me climbing the ladder and have reached out their hand and just helped me get to the next rung. They haven't catapulted me to the top. They haven't brought me up beside them and ushered me into the world, but they've turned around and helped me up the step. And you can't ask more than that. But it's surprisingly how few people will do it in the industry. So when you do get someone like Rolf and Greg McLean, that will turn around and see the struggle because they know what it's like. It's good. And I hope I've done that with some filmmakers in my own way. And I hope that as the more my career goes on, I can help people with theirs. I do get contacted a lot by young filmmakers who email me and want to talk to me and ask me questions about how I've done it. And I usually take their calls and talk to them and give them time because I know the struggle.
I want to talk about Legend of Ben Hur. Like we talked about this film before.
Yep.
Back, I'll put the listening notes down at the bottom for everyone to the link to our other conversations about Legend of Ben Hur and the cost as well. The thing I want to ask you about that movie though is that you had the really grand design for that at first. It was like this big kind of 20-30 million dollar thing. You couldn't get the finances or the resources for that. So you kind of took the second third of it. You made Legend of Ben Hur what it is, but you
Yes.
still have this other part of the story beforehand, right?
Yes.
Now, from what I understand, is it true that you kind of have like or pretty much almost laid out like in the way that you do it with that again going back to that precision directing kind of stuff,
Yep.
a kind of like an anthology series called the Bushrangers? Is that what that part of Legend of Ben Hur is, or is that something that even expands beyond Legend of Ben Hur? Are we talking about other Bushrangers as well? Is that where your Ned Kelly dreams come into the fruition as well in that project? Is that what you're
Yeah,
kind
with
of
the
thinking
bush
of
with the
going
bush
about?
rangers. Yeah.
Yeah,
I mean, when I made Ben Hur, what I really hoped was that it would be successful enough and I could make, The Legend of Frank Gardner and The Legend of John Vane, which would be
right.
companion films to The Legend of Ben Hur. They tell different stories about different characters, but they actually are chronologically in order and characters are all feeding into each other's stories. But Ben Hur was not successful enough, especially here. Overseas, it did a lot better, but over here, it was no one saw it. So that didn't happen. So what I did is I took all those scripts that I'd written and years of research, got together with a guy called Aidan Phelan, who runs the Guide to Australian Bushranging website, and he's like an expert on every bushranger. And we got together and decided, well, actually, we're going to try to make a Ned Kelly film called Glen Rowan, and we got really close, but the true history of the Kelly gang got in there before us.
Mm.
And so what we decided to do was go, well, hang on. These stories actually work better as a TV series, especially if we want to be historically faithful. So we essentially decided to go, you know what? Instead of trying to make all these individual movies about all these different individual bushrangers, why don't we just put them all together? I mean, all half these guys all knew each other and were riding around anyway at the same time. So we mapped out a 6-part, 48 episode series called The Bushrangers. that starts in the mid 1950s and ends in, sorry, 1850s and ends in the mid 1880s. Goes all the
Mm.
way through Frank Gardner through to Ned Kelly and weaves those stories together over a 25-year period or something. And we've been pitching that since about 2018 to all the streamers.
And is it
And
true that, sorry to cut you off, is it true that you went to Netflix US and they were like, this sounds awesome because they love the bushranger stuff over there, especially, right? Because it's like they love the Australian mythos and all that stuff. And then they said, ask Netflix Australia, see what their reaction is to it. And Netflix Australia went, no. Which kind
yeah,
of boggles my mind because you got the Americans who, have it happens a lot, actually, when I talk to Australian filmmakers. I can't tell you how many times lately, especially in the last several years, they go to the film markets first in America,
yep.
especially, and especially when I'm talking about like genre films and stuff, and they get their stuff approved and finance and stuff more over there than we do here. Does it come down to
Oh yeah.
short-sightedness, or does it just come down to money?
Look, there's not a lot of money here in Australia, but there's my biggest problem with Australia and getting finances here is number one, we don't have investors because it's just too risky.
Right,
So they're so few and far between. But it's just there's an attitude here in Australia that's all wrong. It's
right,
all wrong. They look at movies like they're like movies are some sort of cultural, I don't know, they're being made with the wrong purpose. A movie's function is to entertain. That's what
right.
it is. It's a piece of entertainment. If along the way you can bring awareness to an issue or you can enlighten people about something, great, do it. But those things seem to be front and center, especially when it comes to anything you want financed, or help with from funding bodies. It's like there's this, the theme or the agenda or whatever it is. That's the loftiest, biggest thing. But it's like, well, that's not translating to entertainment. That's not
Yeah,
what the audience wants. So that film will come out and it won't make
yeah.
any money. It makes it more risky. That's why we're losing investors. Americans don't think that way. They look at films like a business. Now, it might be a bit more on the other side now. It's so business minded that they can't get intellectual properties out of their head, but they have a far more business mind look at it, and that's the problem with Australia. So, yeah, we had, like I said, we had Netflix and Paramount and lots of places take an interest in the Bushrangers and go, yeah, this looks good. But every time it was referred to the Australian um, office, it was just rejected. And it was rejected. I mean, going back 5, 6 years now. But the biggest reason it was rejected is because it wasn't female centric enough.
Mm,
I mean, of course it's not. It's bushrangers, right? Like they're
yeah.
all bearded guys and young men, and it is a very male centric series. However, it has a huge female component. They may not be bushrangers, but there's, wives and lovers, girlfriends. There's even a couple of female bushrangers in there. There is a huge female component, but they are not the primary focus. They're more a secondary focus.
Hmm.
Um, but that wasn't good enough. And because it wasn't, and I think got 5 or 6 years ago, that was where they wanted all their TV shows to go. And you only have to look at television now to go, oh yeah, that's exactly what they were going for. So we're hoping that, the pendulum's swinging back the other way, the balance might be coming back, and they'll look on this with a bit more, balance and go, okay, it's male centric, but this genre is very male centric, but it's not without female characters by any
And it,
means.
it frustrates me because like I hear about these stories all the time, and it always comes down to what you're talking about as well. It's like not it isn't what what's the prospect of people will enjoy the movie. It's what's the prospect of the people will take on the message of the movie.
Yeah.
Um, and a lot of the times, and it's such a 1990s way of thinking about things.
Yep.
And what I mean by that is that if you look at back at the 90s, like if it's the movie has to do with something, and which well, you got to look at the taboo subjects of that time, right? That were like
Yep.
very kind of activist driven, like gay rights or maybe indigenous rights and stuff like that. Those movies were pushed. And it still seems to me that those movies are still the ones that are earmarked to be pushed. But I think we've gone beyond that stuff now. And while those movies are being pushed, the movies that are actually making money in the cinemas are the Wolf Creeks and all those
Yes.
kind of movies like that. They're the movies that are making money. So it's frustrating to me because there's just so many great filmmakers I'm talking to, like yourself, Matthew, where have this great idea. And I think the idea of having a Bushrangers style TV series share same world, overlapping the same stories, it could be easily kind of like a Outback Sopranos, or it could easily be kind of like a Game of Thrones kind of style thing as well. There's potential there to
Oh
bring
yeah.
these historical figures to life, but then making new pop culture icons. I know Ned Kelly is, but a lot of other bushrangers aren't, and make that pop culture icons. There's potential there
Yeah.
for a really great kind of like actors and performances, and to go to other things. I think it's frustrating to me to hear about it. And it comes back a lot of times to, sometimes, even go back to the 70s and stuff, like people like a George Miller stuff will have an idea for a movie and no one want to fund it, and then they just have to make it themselves. It's like I think it's just crazy. Well, my hope is that Legend of Ben Hur having this kind of like this second wind now with Stan and people watching it, and there's some interest in that kind of world. And also the hope that the pendulum kind of swings the other way from this thing where everything was kind of like feminized. And I think post Acolyte now, I don't watch Star Wars, but I know enough of that kind of
Yeah.
series to know that
Same.
that didn't work out. Like that post kind of thing where a lot of people kind of pushing that kind of what do they call it, the strong female lead thing didn't work. It hasn't worked, and I'm hoping now that kind of goes back to just a little more that there is a little more of a masculine kind of presentation. And I think the Bushranger stories especially have that. And not to mention, it's Australian history as well, bringing Australian history to life. That
Yeah.
isn't, it can't just be the story about the stolen generations. It can't just be the story of, that kind of stuff. There's other stories as well. There's heaps of other stories as
Oh,
well.
absolutely.
And it just
It
bums
was a
me out to
real,
hear. Yeah.
yeah, and like you said, it is the Sopranos in the Outback. It would be like Game of Thrones in Australia because all these characters and worlds are overlapping, and it's a sprawling cast. And not only and it's not just bushrangers, it's the policemen who are hunting them down. It's the
Yeah.
women in their lives and their children that are affected by it. It's the civilian population. It's the Chinese people who are over here in the gold rush. It's the indigenous people who are constantly clashing and merging and mixing with this world. So it doesn't just look at the bushrangers, even though that's its title. It's about that world and that time and how it was, this huge mixing pot of violence and clashing cultures. And, I just think it really would be the Game of Thrones and Sopranos of Australia that has on a level that's never, ever been seen in this country before. And yeah, there's so much potential for it. I just really hope that we, someone with that kind of who has that kind of vision, has that kind of money, will back it, and at least get one season made. Like that's all I really ask for. I've got 6 episodes, or 6 or 8 episodes for season one. Like just let's get it financed. Hell, even let's just finance the pilot.
Mm.
So we'll see what happens. Hopefully there's enough interest, and because we've written the pilot, and it's a great pilot. So who knows? Let's hope there is the pendulum swing and we
It
see more of
just
this.
I just sometimes it boggles the mind with some of these actors, like Aussie actors in Hollywood, and they are of certain wealth. I don't know if they do or don't. I don't really see that much they do, but can kind of, I know Nicole Kidman is a producer now. She's produced a lot of stuff for HBO, and I was like, can we get some? Let's get some, Nick, bring some of that movie down here. Let's get
Yeah, that's
some, it's
it.
awesome stuff. Russ, let's get some. Let's go. Hugh, Mel, give a Mel. Come on, Mel. Come on back. Hacksaw
Yeah,
Ridge did good for you, mate. Come on back and let's do
that's
it again.
it. And put some money
Yeah,
into this something like this. I know
yeah,
I get a lot of feedback, people going, "Oh, well, the Australian accents. Oh no, that's not going to be popular because it's Australian. And
bullshit.
Americans want America. That's garbage. Man of Snow River is one of the most popular westerns in America. It's
Yeah,
full of Australian accents. Peaky Blinders is full of British Cockney accents. They're as
yeah,
difficult to understand as Australian. That's a
yeah.
huge series in America. And so I think there's just every time someone says one of those rubbish naysaying things, there's always a great exception to that rule that proves that that's not a rule. If it's well made and it's a great series and the characters are engaging, people around the world are going to flock to it.
Yeah.
As we've seen, with Squid Game, a Korean series in Korean, huge all
Yeah.
around the world.
Yeah.
Stories, good filmmaking have no borders, and
Yeah.
people, but distributors and producers and executives, they still think with borders all around their brains, and
Yeah.
that's, I think, is the most frustrating thing as a creative. Creative people don't have borders. They break borders. They look beyond borders. They don't think with borders. But all the gatekeepers think with borders. And that
Yeah.
is one of the most frustrating things about being a filmmaker in this time, is
Again, it's
dealing,
that
because
night.
they're the
Yeah.
gatekeepers.
1990s filmmaking, thought process again. I think, just
Yeah.
stuck in, they're still stuck in the time of Strictly Ballroom and stuff. Anyway,
Yeah.
let's move on to this other game I like to play. It's called Rapid Fire Questions. I'm going to throw a question at you. Try to answer as quick as you can. If you want to abbreviate, go ahead. All
Go.
right. So first one's going to be tricky because I'm just like that. Favorite Western?
Assassination of Jesse James.
Ah, very cool. I love that movie. Andrew Dominic. That's that film. I didn't get to see it on a big screen, and it always bummed me out. The first time I got to see it was on a small screen. But if that's the type of film that if they re-release that again, like in the sense we talk
Oh
about
yeah.
re-release things, I'd
I'd go.
watch that again
I'd
straight
go.
away.
I did see it in cinemas, but I'd go again.
Yeah, absolutely. Favorite Australian war movie. Since you're diving into war movies next, what's Australian
Gallipoli.
war movie? Gallipoli.
Gallipoli. One of my favorite
You
films
know,
ever.
it's really interesting how a lot of I like watching. I don't know why reaction videos on YouTube, like people
Yes,
reacting
I
to
like watching
movies.
them. Yep.
Sometimes I find when I watch them, it's kind of like I'm reliving the movie experience again. And
Exactly. I have
Gallipoli is
exactly the
becoming a little
same.
bit of a favorite with Americans over there because
Good,
again they don't
good.
really know our history and all that, and so that's become a favorite again. And that's again another one that will be awesome on a big screen again, I
Oh,
think.
I'd love to go see that on the big screen. I missed it. I was a kid when it came out.
Yeah, that's right. What was that? Been 80? I think that was 81. I'm
It was
pretty sure it was
81, so I
81.
was very, very
81.
young. Yeah.
First time I saw that was in school when I was in year seven, I
Oh,
think.
yep, yep.
They showed us that movie, and I was like, "Oh, Mel Gibson." At that time, just naive, like, well, I was 13, so I guess I could be naive about it. I didn't know Mel Gibson was it well, not Australian because he was born in New York, right? But partially Aussie. So I didn't know he
Yes.
did like all these Aussie films. Okay. Is Die Hard a Christmas movie?
Yes.
Man, I'm isolated in my little island here because I've been saying no for a long time now, but a lot of people have been saying yes and putting their reasons in front of me. In that context, though, if Die Hard is a Christmas movie, does that make Lethal Weapon a Christmas movie as well? Because
Um,
Lethal Weapon is set during Christmas.
yes,
Gary
I think
Busey in first song is like a Christmas song when a woman jumps out the window.
yep. And I think the
Mel
credits have a
Gibson.
Christmas song, don't they?
We're going to see a Christmas song. Gary Busey and Mel Gibson doing Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu in the front yard with Christmas lights around them. I mean,
Yeah.
that's a
I
does that
think
does
it
that count as well?
I think it probably would under those same rules, but there's just something about Die Hard that really pushes Christmas. Like they really make a big deal of it. Like they mention it all the time. There's Christmas trees everywhere. The music, there's just this big focus on it. Whereas I think it's a little more incidental. It's there, but it's a bit more on the sidelines with Lethal Weapon. But something about Die Hard, it really screams Christmas. I think because again, it's all set on one night. It's all set
Mm,
on Christmas Eve. Whereas I think Lethal Weapon is sort of spaced out over the Christmas period.
yeah.
So it doesn't feel as I guess as there's something very strong about Christmas in Die Hard, and that's why I think it's become a Christmas movie. So yeah, so I consider it a Christmas movie.
The second one's set in Christmas as well, isn't it?
Yeah,
Die
it
Harder.
is definitely. Yeah, and I guess
Yeah,
that would be a Christmas movie too because it's got
yeah.
all it's all set on Christmas Eve at the same time, and yeah, so yeah, they're both Christmas movies.
I think that's why, out of the Die Hard series, I think and it was on TV not long ago. I think my favorite one is actually the third one, with a Vengeance, because
Yeah.
it's so different because it's set during the day. Like it's
Yes.
not set like during like a nighttime kind of thing. And it's
Yep.
summer, like I think it's like a July 4 weekend or
That's
something like
right.
that when the
Yeah.
movie's set, right? So it's all kind of like it's sweaty McLean, It's not like,
Absolutely.
it's different, yeah.
No,
It's quite
I
funny.
love Die Hard 3. I think next to Die Hard 1, it is the best. It's Die Hard 1, then 3, then 2. I don't know
Yeah.
of any other Die Hards. Do you know of any other Die Hards? I don't.
Well,
Because
I don't mind four. I don't mind
okay,
four,
I
to tell you
couldn't
the
get
truth.
through 4, but
No,
no,
I
I
don't
got
mind
I
four.
got a part way, but I couldn't get through the rest of it.
Five,
5,
with
yeah, we don't
yeah,
talk about 5.
I know this is an idea I always had. If I had all the money in the world and I was like, and I can make a movie, you know how like they make kind of like films, so kind of like where they have like two different franchises kind of clash together.
Oh
I
yeah.
had this idea where it will be Die Hard clashes with Rambo.
Oh
And
yes.
my idea would be that John J. Rambo snaps and takes kind of like a government building hostage because
Oh
they're
yep.
hiding secrets about POWs, and they bring in John McClane to try to
Oh, okay,
stop
to
him.
deal with
But
him.
then they work together at the end to get down to the conspiracy. That's always been my dream. It never happened, but yeah, that was always my
Unfortunately,
dream.
those guys are well. Poor old Bruce is
Yeah,
in no condition to make movies, and Sly is getting old. But
yeah.
we'll just have to, yeah. Oh well.
I'll put that in the fantasy
Right,
file.
right.
Okay.
Get AI to make it. There you go.
Last one. Pineapple on pizza. Yes or no?
Absolutely not.
Thank you.
Absolutely not. No, no, no. Oh, I'm married to an Italian, so ooh, pineapple on pizza, bad.
Thank you. The last couple of guests had said yes,
Really?
and I was like very like I was just feeling really sad for society at that point.
Yeah. Yeah, when I see
Um,
people
th
backing pineapple on pizza, I feel bad about that. I'm like, what?
yeah,
What's wrong with the world?
and I told them their answer is incorrect as well. By the way, I let
Oh,
them
good.
know.
Because, well, they
Very
are
firmly.
incorrect. Because if the
Yes,
Italians
exactly.
say no pineapple on pizza, they have authority on this because they are Italians. They invented
Yeah,
their damn food. So
they're those eating pineapple on pizza are watching Die Hard 5 as well. So
that's right.
they're both in
That's
the
it.
same
That's a
land of
good
delusion.
t-shirt. Those are have pineapple on pizza. Watch Die Hard 5.
Hard
Yeah.
Five, yeah. You just change Die Hard 5 for any other movie as well.
Is that Rings of
Like
Power? Yeah.
Alien 4, all of them.
Yeah, yeah.
Um, Last question that I have for our conversation. I saw this post that you made, talking about how in Australia only 32% of first-time filmmakers make a second film,
Yes.
and the number like for your consecutive films after that, the percentages are lower, lower,
They
lower,
just
lower,
drop and
lower,
drop and drop. Yep.
drop and drop. You, however, are kind of like like I was saying in my intro, are the exception to the rule. You have like what, three films in the can now. You have Fear Below coming out soon. You're doing Guns and Mushu. And you're always saying that you have different things in the pot and all that. Why do you think it is about that big drop? Because it's interesting that you said that, because I was thinking about some of the filmmakers that I have talked to that have done Australian films, especially like indie Australian films, and I haven't
Yep.
heard from them again, or I get in touch with them and go, "What are you doing?" It's like, look, you just couldn't do it because money wise couldn't get it done, so I moved back into advertising or moved back into what have you. What do you
Yep.
think that drop comes down to? Does it just come down to because we are in the film industry in Australia doesn't have enough private equity behind it and is so based on government funding that's the main purpose of it? Is
That's a
that what
big.
it is?
I think there's several reasons. First one, no, there's hardly any private equity, which is a big problem because
Yeah.
we're not treating films as products, and we need to be getting into genre. We need to make films that sell internationally. We need to stop. You know what we need to do is we need to stop making Australian films. Let's
Hmm.
just make films.
Films,
If
yeah.
they happen to be set in Australia or with Australian accents, but stop making Australian films. Like, let's just make
Yeah.
films.
Yeah.
Borderless films. So that doesn't help. Also, the film funding bodies. You've got a lot of snouts in a very small trough,
Hmm.
and you've got every snout trying to get in, and there's only so much in that trough. And unfortunately, a lot of the biggest, fattest, well-fed pigs who've been had their nose in that trough for years still are at the trough. And the young ones and the can't push in, they can't get in. There's nothing left. So it's that's a big problem as well. Because again, the government shouldn't really be supporting the industry. The industry should be supporting itself with a little bit of industry help.
Yeah, exactly.
But it's not. It's all out of whack. And so that doesn't help either. But I think the reason for the drop off is that it is just as such an exceptionally difficult industry to stay in and to stay the course in. You make one film and you think it's going to be easier to make the next film. That's that starry-eyed naivety. Oh, if I make one, it'll be easy to make my next one, and it'll be easy to make my next one. It's just
Right.
not. It's as hard as it was the second and the third and the fourth time. It doesn't get any easier. And what happens is as you get older, you get more impatient, you get more frustrated. You also, your priorities start to change. Maybe you're going to start a family, maybe you want to get a mortgage, and the film industry doesn't support these things very well.
Yeah.
Not unless you really make it big somewhere, and those are the exceptions to the rule, not the rule. And so unless you really hit the big time young and get over that hurdle, it's very hard to stay the course. So I've had to very much adjust my lifestyle and my expectations of my lifestyle and where I am to accommodate the fact that, this is what gives me the staying power. If I wanted to start a family and have a mortgage and do all that sort of stuff and travel the world all the time, I wouldn't be able to do it being a filmmaker. So I just don't think a lot of people can stick with it. After one or two, they realize it's going to be just as hard to make three and four. And so they, like you said, they go to advertising, they move into something else. Makes sense. You have to, this is what I tell people all the time. If there's anything else you'd rather do than be a filmmaker, do that. Don't
Mm.
be a filmmaker. It's too hard. It'll break your heart every day. You'll be disappointed and you'll face, like you said, constant rejection. And you just have to be the kind of person. You have to be Rocky. How long can you stay in the ring and just get beaten up and just keep going, keep standing up for the next round? And that's what
Yeah.
filmmaking is. That's
And the
all it
thing
is.
about Rocky is though is that even though in those early rounds he gets, beaten, he starts throwing those punches back. And sometimes you
Yeah.
cut the Russian,
Yeah,
and sometimes
exactly.
yeah, and you get the knockout. Or sometimes, you take it to the 12th round. And I think
Yeah.
really what when I'm looking at your career and how you're going about it, I think that's what you're doing as well. Um, you were right now, you over the last, I say from Ben Hall forwards, you've definitely been hitting those punches. The Cost, one of my favorite Aussie films last year, and this,
Awesome.
like when I watch The Cost, I love that. And a lot of people as well, like online, like I never knew this film was out, just came across it. It's like wow, this is a really awesome movie as well. Letterbox reviews, etc., etc.
Great.
And I'm really interested to see what you're going to do with the shark genre next because you got Fear Below coming up
Yes.
next as your next film.
Yes. I
Bull
don't know when
Shark as
it's
well
I
from
don't it's a bull shark. That's right. I
yeah.
don't know when it's gonna come out. I haven't set a release date yet. But that was again, an interesting the way that Fear Below came about was because a producer of mine, he said to me, I was trying to get films up and they weren't getting financed, and I had nothing to do during lockdown. And he said, why don't you write a shark movie, Matt? Because I can always sell a shark movie.
Mm,
And I thought, I don't want to make a shark film. They suck, There's only two good shark movies in the world. And but I sat on that for a couple of weeks and I thought, come up with an idea that you like. So I came up with, I've always loved the idea of bull sharks and how they swim in fresh water. And I thought, set it in a river. That's different because you got to
mm,
look for a point of difference, right? And so it was get the bull shark, set it in a river. Let's make it a period film as well. So it's not modern. So set it in the 1940s and come up with a story that's really, really fun and interesting and more fun and interesting just beyond a shark. There's more to
mm,
it. And
yeah.
that was the challenge. And and then when I wrote it and it went out to their market out overseas, boom, pre-sales. Did like $1.3 million of pre-sales just on the script alone. And so it was proof that if you write something for what the market wants, usually the market will respond. They'll like it. So
Yeah.
yeah, that will you'll get to see that you'll get to see what I did with that, hopefully before the end of the year. Who knows?
Well, I can't wait to see when it comes out because, as you know, man, I'm a big fan of your films and I've always been following
Thank
your
you.
career. And it's always great to be able to talk to you and talk. And this time, the long form talk. I think it's a really great chat. One of my favorites I've had in a while. And for everyone out there listening, I really urge you to check out Matt's films. You can follow, what's the best kind of plugs we can have for you to follow your stuff on socials?
Oh, look, the best way to follow me is probably through the Legend of Ben Hall page or the Cost page, Guns and Mushu page. I usually have a page for every one of my films. That's probably the best way. I always keep them updated. And yeah, please check out, the Cost and the Legend of Ben Hall. They're available on Stan. So do check them out. And and for those people that do like my work, please leave me a review on Rotten Tomatoes or IMDb or Google or whatever. Every thumbs up we get is it just helps.
It does. It does. And I'm going to have links to all of those pages in the show notes. And once
Awesome.
again, Matthew Holmes, thank you so very much for your time. And
No
yeah, talk again,
worries.
man.
Yeah,
It's
thank you for
awesome.
having me. It was great.